RWBY Volume 7, Episode 4, Pomp and Circumstance. This is a decent episode, of course, coming off of like the cool action episode where it's like, here's all the new technology, here's all the new costumes, here's, the full display of Team Clover or, the Aesop's team. This is definitely a more subdued episode. We get a really great ending, which I wish was like most of the episode just because I want to see what the heck is going to go on there. We have, all the ending bits leading up to some big thing with our villains, of course, and this time we actually have Arthur involved. But, of course, I'll save that for the end. Other than that, it was a simple episode. There wasn't, like, a ton of stuff to admittedly talk about. It was, like, the characters talking about the big moments. But for the most part, there were only, like, 3 big things in this episode. And really, it was at the very beginning. It, takes off right after the last episode. They've defeated the Dust Golem. They come out, and it's like, holy crap, you guys are absolutely amazing. And then it gets into what I consider the important part of them kind of fawning all over, no pun intended, the Aesop's team, which is they basically say, oh yeah, we're not really friends. We have our job, we're not really friends and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, either they're going to influence them and it's going to be, very anime-esque, where it's like, you guys are friends, you're even family and stuff like that, or that won't happen and they'll still just be cool characters anyway. I think the difference in ideology will just kind of help us get more good content. Oddly enough, even though it's like one of those pseudo cliche things, it's always like that. At some point, the group of characters runs into people that do the exact same thing, but they're like, I barely even like these people. We just work together. That happens in like everything where there's ever a main group of characters. It's always like, especially if the story literally focuses on them being like an actual team, it always happens at some point. They come across another team, and the other team is like, yeah, we do exactly what you do. We just don't really like each other. You're like, it's just the job, and it doesn't matter. So it happens. I was just like, oh, that's interesting. We'll see how that plays out, because I think when things get darker, that's when it'll start to have a better storyline to it, because I think we're going to see some stuff happen, especially with how things are playing with, Arthur and Tyrion. We're going to see some stuff happen with the Aesops. Even if none of them end up becoming like actual villains, it's going to get down to that point where it is like, oh, okay, we have characters who, especially Weiss even says it, like she considers, the rest of the girl's family. We're going to have that dynamic come into play where we'll see them do that. They'll have some moment where they, they actually rescue each other, and then we'll see the Aesops and it'll be like, oh man, you guys really don't care about each other. It's like, when it comes down to it, I think it's going to end up being survival of the fittest for those characters, and that'll be interesting to see. I could be wrong, and we might see who does and doesn't care. If anyone would care, I feel like it would be Mero out of all those people. Even though they make fun of him the most, I think he's the one that would actually care the most. And it's probably because of how he gets treated. It's like, I just want to be there for everyone else so you guys don't feel like I do, even though you kind of just make jokes. It gets to people, stuff like that. So I think he'd care in that situation. Maybe that's who would end up dying. If anything, it would be the character that does care the most out of the group of people that don't care. That's, it gets you with the emotions. But I feel like that was the main point of having that little scene. Of course, Nora doing the Thunder Thighs thing was fantastic. That was hilarious. I haven't brought that back in a while. So last time I remember, I think really the only time they actually mentioned that was in the RWBY Chibi thing. I don't think it's ever been mentioned in like the regular RWBY series. So that was super funny actually. So I love that. But of course, we have Jacque show up and he's super pissed. He's just pissed. He's Jacque. So he's mad at Ironwood. He's trying to get a seat on the council. He's mad about everything. And then of course he sees Weiss, and for good reason, she's mad at him and he's pissed. And of course, when he can't do anything physical because Ironwood's right there and he calls him out on it, he switches to the mental tactic where he's like, man, your mom was so sad when you left. Like, how she gets. She wouldn't come out of her room for days. And it was like, he's that much of a dick where it's like, I can't physically hit you because they'll hit me, but I can definitely mess with you mentally. Like, I know you don't give a crap about me, but you still care about your alcoholic, depressed mother. So I'm going to throw that in your face because everything's your fault. I was like, what a great person, I guess. So, he takes off, and that's when, Winter kind of comes in, which is clearly, she was on that truck, like, as soon as the ship went up, she drove right in, and Wes is like, oh, it's funny that you show up now, and, like, clearly, she was, like, right off screen, just like, I don't want to see him right now, I'll just wait till the ship leaves, and then she's like, sweet, and then she just pulled up right after, so I thought that was actually kind of funny, where it was just, like, literally, she was right there. I thought at first it was just going to be like, okay, they're, this person is, like, way at the top, so it was just some regular grunts. They're gonna come up and say like, once I wait till he was gone, but this thing is happening. That's what I thought was about to happen because of how fast they pulled up. And it was like, no, it was just Winter. She saw her dad and was like, I don't like him either. So I was like, I'll let that be its thing. So I thought that was pretty good. But of course, after that, we do have what I would consider really the biggest moment of the episode for the characters, and it's another one of those moments where it's like this weird dynamic for them. They get their licenses. They become official huntsmen and huntresses. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, okay, that is interesting. And they even reference it like, man, after everything we've been through, I kind of forgot this was the whole point. Like Yang says it, Ruby's still having her issues where it's like, man, we're being given these licenses by Ironwood, and he's going through his whole speech, and everyone's kind of frozen because he's like, I gotta give you guys these things because not only do you deserve them, but I need to know that I have more people that I can trust, and this and that, and Salem. As I was like, sweet. So of course they're just kind of frozen there, like no one really says anything except for Ruby, like, we're all honored, and that's like the only thing I believe they say the entire time, outside of asking questions, of course, like, is this really happening and stuff. There's one thanks, and then after that they're all just kind of dead silent because it's like, yep, trust, definitely trust. So everyone's in this weird position. It's like, it's been such a long time. They've lost people. They've gone through far more than a lot of, huntsmen and huntresses really do go through. So for them, it's just like, wow, it just seems weird at this point. Like, it's not that big thing that they were working towards in the beginning. Things have just become so insane. It's just like, wow, we're here now, in title, at least. I'd say they were there before, but now it's like, man, we're definitely here in title. So they have their celebration, and it's kind of like a pseudo celebration. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good moment. And of course, they do it in Amity Arena, which I thought was really cool. So, obviously, a lot of stuff is tied to that. Of course, like the change, I would say more than anything else, that arena is what led to the greatest changes that they went through that kind of made becoming a huntsman or becoming a huntress totally trivial. It was Volume 3. And it was in that arena where things began to turn, where it was like, that stuff doesn't mean anything. Like, it's time to just survive. So thought that was cool. Definitely some great stuff. After that, it's like, like I said, they had the little talk. Ruby talks with Crow. Crow actually said like quite a few things in this episode, which I thought was great. They referenced the fact that Summer went on a mission on her own and no one knew what was happening. Then poof, she disappeared. And I was like, okay, they've never, like, that's the closest they've ever come to saying anything that she's really done. So that I thought was fantastic. I was like, all right, we at least got something there. It was, she went out on her own and that's how she died. So I was like, all right, I don't think we've technically had that at any point in time. I think it was just at some point she died, because they specified the whole thing where it was like, no, it was a mission that she went on. It was like a summer mission. So I was like, oh, okay. I think just like everyone else, I just kind of assumed at some point she died. They were on a mission or something happened, because obviously she died young for Taiyang to end up with someone else and then, end up with Raven. And then, of course, they have Yang. So it was like, obviously, she died before she probably should have, but it was just seemed like at some point they thought it probably was an Oz-based thing because of the whole stuff where it's like, obviously, Crow and Raven, they got actual magic, so I would assume the other two members on their team figured out some stuff from Crow as well. The exact same thing, but it was interesting. I was like, all right, that's like a tiny little hint into what happened this summer, which I feel like if they're bringing it up, I would hope that means we're going to get a flashback later in the volume. It would be interesting if we did, because I feel like it would have to tie into a new character. Otherwise, it would be weird that it could technically tie in, from Crow, but he didn't know anything about the mission. They just kind of knew that she died. And now that I think about it, considering that she kind of left and died, I do wonder if, like, that place where her actual graveyard is where she died, or where her tombstone is where she actually died, or if that's just kind of like a pauper's grave. It's just a memorial grave site, because they don't know what actually happened to her or where her body, really is, or something like that. So that was something that, I kind of thought about really just now, because I was like, oh, okay, well, if they didn't know what happened, it's possible that that's not really where she's buried. That's just, like, it's just a scenic place that, it's on a hilltop. It's like, it's a very proper thing to do for someone that you respect. So I was like, oh, maybe we'll see more. Maybe we won't. Who the F knows? But after that, a little emotional moment. We had the team officially picking out their first missions. Naturally, I feel like it's been a minute since they've officially done it, but Jean was kind of made fun of, because of course he ends up being the guy who escorts the kids. And then of course they go into like the epic mission where we gotta like fight Beowulfs and stuff like that. It wasn't Beowulfs. It's whatever they call the new, like, saber-tooth grim. I forget what they call them. And of course everyone laughs at him and stuff. And I was like, okay, simple Jean joke. Then we moved to Jacque and possibly his brother. They didn't say anything. They didn't drop the exposition like, oh, is it, is he gonna say some dear brother types? The classic exposition when it's two characters that seem like they look a lot alike. But I gotta assume that they're related. I just really have to. Like, of course they made it where it's like, obviously they have they got the epic mustaches and stuff, but in general they do kind of have the same hairstyle. Like, if you really look at it, it's almost like it's kind of like a Dante and Virgil type thing for people who play Devil May Cry. And people who don't, simply put, Virgil always has his hair back, and Dante always has his hair down. But they're twins, so like there's specifically in Devil May Cry 3, it rains during one of the fight scenes, and both their hair just goes flat down, and they look exactly the same. And I was like, I feel like it's just that sort of aesthetic, and of course, obviously, Jacque has all white hair at this point, and Arthur does not. So I was like, okay, I feel like it's kind of that aesthetic, but like I mentioned before in the whole thing where I think they're brothers, it's just one got the genes from like one parent and the other got genes from the other parent. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And of course, Arthur does comment on, I forgot what the F his son's name, the little douchebag. He comments on him and he's like, he's a spitting image of you, like creepily so, but he certainly picked up your effect. And I was like, okay, so it's like a pseudo, like albinism type thing, because of course they have like the pale white skin and the white hair. But, I mean, of course it's like a supernatural world and it's all fake. But in real life, people who have albinism have red eyes. So that's like the one thing. And it could just be the fact that, instead of red, they just went with blue because it kind of matches their aesthetic, where it's like everything's, white and blue. So they just went with blue instead of going with the red. And Arthur didn't end up getting that. So it's interesting. They don't really reference it too much. It's just like, oh, you're supposed to be dead. Obviously, they work together. Obviously, Jacque is absolute garbage, so that's why the villains went to him to help, because it's like, they know they can. He was probably one of the 2 missing people, or 3, at Salem's table. Like, I still think he's one of the people we haven't seen, not that I can think of, I don't think we've seen anyone that could fit the place of, like, those other 2 seats that were absent. So we have 3 people that were missing. I assume Jacque is one of them, and then probably, if not this season, then maybe like next season, or maybe even the one after, we'll get to see the other 2 people that are supposed to fill those vacant seats. But I think they're related. I still think they're related. There's a million things that show evidence to it, aside from the fact that they look the same. Obviously, they referenced a long time ago that Jacque took the Schnee last name, so it's totally possible his last name is Watts, just like Arthur. He just changed his name. Obviously, they're both from Atlas. They know each other. One's supposed to be dead. Villains are always like that, and considering they're both douchebags and they are potentially brothers, I could easily see them just being like, oh, I thought you were dead, and he just doesn't care because it's his brother, and obviously he doesn't care about anyone in his family, so why his brother that he basically left behind a long time ago, and who went off and did something. I mean, Arthur was the one that like built the foundation for some of the tech in the city, and yet he just kind of abandoned it all and just was like, I'm out of here. So it's interesting. And clearly in all that time, it hasn't really changed. It hasn't been like super upgraded and things have become so far advanced he can't do it. It's like, nope, it's exactly the same. He can hack into every camera. He can get any files he wants. It's still the same thing. Like, he was the basis for that. So clearly he was a very big part of what goes on, if not in Atlas, at least in Mantle. And I would assume, as far as Atlas goes, he's probably fairly well involved in that stuff too. So it's interesting. If anything, he was probably more successful than Jacque was until Jacque got married. That was probably like their weird thing, and Jacque might just have issues, and he was like, I hate my brother because he's successful and I'm not. And then he was like, oh sweet, I was able to kind of push my way into this family, and now I'm like the best dude ever, in his own eyes, of course. But interesting little ending. The villain goes to another villain for help. So I'm looking forward to that. Like I said in my last review, I hope that we don't have too many episodes where it's just the villains at the end, because I want to see what they're doing. Like, I would love it if it was the next episode. I doubt it will be, but I would love it if the next episode is just like, boom, it picks up just where this episode left off, and it's them having the conversation, or it's at least Arthur talking to Tyrion, and it's just like, all right, Jacque is in, this is what the plan is, and then we kind of get the ball rolling, because last we saw the villains, as far as what they were actually doing, Salem was going like full Wicked Witch, and she was turning the gorillas into flying gorillas, because they're like her flying monkeys and stuff. And that's all we've seen. And I was like, okay, well, if she's fully going on the attack, that kind of makes it seem like it's leading up to really what would be the end of the series, because once they defeat her, unless they bring in lesser villains, it's kind of like, oh, we beat her and the main people really trying to like destroy the entire planet. You would think that would be the end of the series. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. I'm sure we have quite a few more volumes, but when you end it with that, it's like something big has to happen. And then, of course, you have Cinder. So if they did defeat Salem, Cinder, of course, would be the one to take over, Cinder and Neo, which I wouldn't mind. If they did it that way, I'd be okay with it. Sadly, Adam can't be the one to do that, because that's kind of the character he was meant to be, like, which you could tell from the way he was beating everybody until he died. He was always the guy beating everybody, but clearly he wasn't as strong as Cinder. But every time they showed him, he just never lost against anybody. It was either a tie or he just decimated them, and that was pretty much it. So sadly, he's gone, so he can't be like an epic villain or anything. So it's up to Cinder, who can be, but I'm curious how that's gonna play out. Like, of course, once Cinder and Emerald get back together, Emerald is gonna transition over. I don't know what in the world Mercury's gonna do, which is my big question. Like, they're friends, but sort of he's in this real weird position. I think he's kind of like the Aesop's people. It's like, in the end, for him, it's like, this is just what I do. I'm kind of just surviving, the strongest survive, and he'll probably stick with Salem and probably get defeated, and then he might end up transitioning over if he doesn't get killed or something. But I don't want him to die. I like his character a lot. It's cool to watch him fight. Plus, he got, like, oddly enough, he has one of the most tragic backstories too, where his dad like effed him up and turned him into a villain and stole his semblance, and of course he's got no legs. So the dude's had a pretty effed up life. He's just had to survive, and that's all there is to it. And it's like, I kind of don't want him to die. He's still a villain, but it would be cool to see him get redeemed. I doubt it'll happen though, admittedly, but still a fun episode. Wish we got a little bit more out of it, and mostly the ending, because it's been the last couple episodes, like I said, like those teases with the villains, like this is what they're doing. They're kind of building up. Of course, we know that one of the small plans is to kind of frame Atlas and specifically like frame Ironwood. So I thought that was cool, and that explains some of the stuff they have in the opening where like people throw a rock at Ironwood. It's because they think he's basically killing off the opposition and stuff like that. And then when they throw the rock, it transitions to Jacque's face for a split second, so he'll be working even harder to make Ironwood seem like the villain, and that's of course exactly what he wants, so he can get on the council and kind of get rid of Ironwood to begin with. So I feel like that's really where that's headed, and that's of course how Tyrion ends up fighting against Robin and stuff like that, and Crow just naturally gets involved in general. So I think that's at least a part of their big plan. Obviously, I feel like it's more than just, hey, let's dismantle Atlas. So I don't really know what the heck they're planning. Probably just steal more dust, have more power, have another base of operations that's not just like off in the grim, center of the world or whatever, the little dragon island that they're on. So maybe that's what they're trying to do, is just have a second base of operations, and just maybe Salem will go there first, so that it's like, all right, we already took control of this, keep things kind of messed up, wipe out the military first, stuff like that. So we'll see how it plays out. But decent episode. Looking forward to the next one. I want to see more action, of course. That's always the best. But if we're not going to get action, I want to get like some serious development moments. I want to see a scene with, I would love to see, honestly, anything with Weiss and her family I think is good, like this small moment we had. But I really do want to see Weiss and Winter have like an official bonding moment where they just get to kind of hash it all out. Because this, I feel like, was the very first time we've ever truly seen Winter just be like, I don't miss Dad, and her totally avoiding him. She was always kind of in line, and obviously she was always riding that line. I think she's officially past it now. So I want to see them really have that moment where they connect. So I'm looking forward to that. And just in general, it would be cool if they did actually go on official Huntsman missions and stuff like that in the next episode. But we'll kind of just have to see how it plays out. As long as we can get some good moments out of it, I'm fine if it doesn't like completely, kick the story into the next level or anything. It just has to be entertaining. So looking forward to it, of course. Would love to know what you guys thought about it. So please put your comments down in the comment section below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it. And based on what we got in this episode, the little clues as to what the villains are doing, trying to frame Ironwood, and of course Arthur potentially going to his brother. I feel like they're brothers. I just feel like they're gonna save it, but I think they're brothers. I hope I'm right on that. But either way, we'll love to know your thoughts on that and where you think it's really gonna end up going by the end of this volume, and possibly going, into the next couple of volumes for this series. So please put your comments down in the comment section below, and of course, thanks for watching.